Well, first of all, apologies, Sebastian, because I knocked off one of your world records at the beginning there. But
you personally?
Well, no, not personally, but I noticed in listing your achievements, you never mention your world records. You merely list your championship goals.
That's right. But actually, the world records for me were, in a way, in many respects, I think they're a better judgment of a career, because it's, actually, it's the only time you can genuinely say that you know for sure you've run faster than anybody else has ever run before. Well, you think that anyway.
But you used to love the major championships, didn't you?
Oh, major championships what really was what I used to get up for in the morning. Yeah. If you started an Olympic year or a major championship year, it was an entirely different feeling than it was if it was, just a series of international meets. Yeah. The major championships, Brendan Foster always used to say to me that at the end of a career, you really want to be able to sit down around the table, and they're the cards, and it's the World Championships, the Olympic Games, the Europeans, the Commonwealth. And I think his view was that you could always, world records were easier to get than major championships. I'm not sure that's the case, but people do make the judgment on major championships.
Now, winning the Olympics for Great Britain versus winning at the Olympics, how does that compare?
It's a good question. And for me, I think that being a part of a team that brought the Games back to the UK for the first time in 64 years was more important than the individual achievements earlier in my career. But the best answer I can give you that is on the lunchtime before the vote, I invited 5 or 6 of our sporting ambassadors just to come to the hotel room we were all in and have lunch. Yeah. And there was Daly there, and Jonathan Edwards, Shirley Robertson, the last that won 2 gold medals in sailing in Athens, Tanni Gray-Thompson, our greatest Paralympian, Adi Ayapatan, the Paralympian basketball player. And they all, to a man and I asked that question, and they all, to a man and woman, said if we got the vote in 4 hours' time, or whenever it was, they would swap anything they'd done previously in their career for that. And I think that was the way we viewed it.
And at that stage, were Paris still very much the favourites as far as, in a sense, the sense of the within Singapore?
You mean up until Jacques Chirac's little contribution the night before?
Which was a nice boost, wasn't it, for the team?
It was funny. Yeah. I mean, you can imagine being communications director on the Paris bid and having to relay that information through to your team that, he'd said what he said. Actually, at the end of the day, I don't think it made a massive deal of difference. But I always said it was too close to call. I think the press thought I was just sort of making it up. But my view was that it would be a handful of votes either way. And certainly over the last 2 or 3 months, when the gap started to close, and I think obviously it started to close, I think we realized that this was going to be really down to the wire.
Now, you were quoted as saying once that you learn a lot about yourself 20 minutes before an Olympic final. What were you feeling, what were you thinking 20 minutes before making that very powerful presentation in Singapore?
Well, you do learn a lot about yourself 20 minutes before an Olympic final. And if you want to sort of set the scene, there are 8 or 9 people who really have been working for 4 years for this moment, probably in a room an eighth the size of this stage, 7 or 8 officials, and you're just sitting there, because I think people think that when you warm up for a race in the Olympic Games, you just warm up and then go straight into the stadium. It's a 3-hour process. And the last 40 minutes before the race, you're literally sitting in a room, in a call-up room, waiting to go through, the bowels of the stadium into the arena. And it's very interesting. You can watch the people who it gets to.
Their mental toughness really comes.
Yeah, and actually, if you're being hard-nosed about it, you can play a few games as well. Yeah. I mean, I remember turning to 2 Kenyan athletes in a major championship, and I looked at one of them and I said, "Do you think you can beat him?" And this really threw him. And for a few minutes, he said, I think so. Yeah. And of course, at that point, I'd got him thinking about something entirely different. And then,
did you and Steve Ovett?
Well, then I turned to his mate, and I said, "That's interesting, because he thinks he can beat you." Well, this for 5 minutes.
They had a major argument, did they, before they went up?
And not quite a major argument, but it certainly. But actually, Steve Kramoff often tells the story. I'd forgotten, but in Moscow, I'd lost the 800 meters, as you saw on that screen, a pretty abject piece of running. And 4 days later, I was back with a 1500. And in the warm-up in that same call room, Steve Ovett, who's a very good friend of mine, actually started to engage me in conversation. He actually said, "I think we should have a drink after all this." I'm thinking, this is not the time to sort of set my social diary. I'm about to bury you.